Hello, sisters. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast, weaving powerful, soulful practices into functional medicine. Step into this beautiful space of devotion and explore everything from nurturing foods, rituals, sexuality, and awakening your innate sensuality. It is time to own your radiance. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and this week we have Lauren Brody. She is the author of The Fifth Trimester, The Working Mom's Guide to Style, Sanity, and Big Success After Baby. So I wanted to bring her on the show because I do not have any experience in this. I have never birthed a baby. I do not intend on birthing a baby in this lifetime. And I wanted to bring her on the show because a lot of my listeners are either about to have a baby, they're newly moms to be, and they've got lots and lots of questions. So we talk a lot about when to actually go back to work after you have a baby. That's a really critical question that so many new moms contemplate. We also talk about if you do go back to work. We talk about childcare and different options there and what she did and what she chose to do. The next thing we talked about was, if you are back at work, like what to do when you start to feel like you just want to quit, like you just want to quit your job and be home with your baby. So we talk a lot about that. Also, how to look like you slept 8 hours, even if you've been up all night with the baby. So I think that's really key. You want to know about these things. And then last but not least, we talk about date night and how important it is to reconnect with your partner, to have some intimate time, date night, dinner night, what have you, and really keep that connection really sweet and keep that going at least once a week. So she talks all about that. So I hope you love this conversation with me and Lauren, and on to the show. And today's special guest is Lauren Brody. She's the author of Fifth Trimester. And this is a book, I came across this book and I just needed to have her on because I think this is something that so many women go through, they contemplate after they have a baby, and I'd love to just dive into some really huge questions. The book is called The Fifth Trimester, The Working Mom's Guide to Style, Sanity, and Big Success After Baby. So welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah. So why did you write this book?
Oh my gosh. I wrote it because it didn't exist when I was going back to work after having my first son. My boys are 6 and 9, so that was a good while ago. And yet I have heard even, talking to people in my new career and new life as an author and a consultant now that things haven't changed that much. When I was pregnant, there were so many resources, so many people celebrating pregnancy and its beauty. And I actually didn't love being pregnant, but okay, fine, celebrate it, great.
Mm-hmm.
I signed up for the baby center emails that told me when my fetus was the size of a kumquat and when he was the size of an eggplant. And then when I had my son, he was a little bit of a fussy baby. Although I had no means of comparison, so I didn't really get that. But I read a book called The Happiest Baby on the Block that explained this idea of the fourth trimester, that human babies are actually born a trimester too soon because of the size of the pelvis and the skull and the baby's brain. So to soothe a cranky newborn baby, you're supposed to recreate the feeling of the womb. So you swaddle and you shush them and you sway them and you let them suckle and kind of all of these things that help them feel cozy and like they're still inside you. Great. That was all very helpful. And then all of the resources just fell off. And I was actually really fortunate. I was working at a women's magazine. I was working at Glamour magazine. At that point, I was an executive level editor. I had, it was a busy, busy job, but I had, a decent paycheck. I had a supportive partner. I had colleagues who openly talked about breastfeeding and boobs all the time, and it was fine. And yet still, I really, really struggled. So I learned only really kind of as I was in it that there was actually this whole other trimester, a fifth trimester, another developmental phase of motherhood, only this one was for mom, not for baby. And once I got through my own, and, and I'm still learning, I think I'm in my 31st trimester now, and I'm still learning. I really vowed to be open about motherhood in the workplace in a way that would help other women feel they could do the same and help us unite together to change some of the cultural challenges in the workplace around parenthood.
I love that. And so I guess the biggest question is women try to decide when to go back. Should they go back? And can you talk a little bit about that, about helping women make that decision?
Sure. Well, I mean, the truth is for most women, it's not really a choice. Yes, you can kind of do the math of, is my paycheck going to do more than barely cover childcare? So there is that decision. And definitely there's a statistic that 30% of professional women in particular drop out of the workforce within the first year after having a baby. But the reality is most American women are not able to sustain a family with only one income, coming from their partner. And that's also assuming that they're partnered up, right? You have lots of single moms too.
Mm-hmm.
We have, obviously, in our country, FMLA, which covers 12 weeks unpaid of parental leave that lets you, leave and be home with your baby if you can afford to be unpaid for 12 weeks. And when you look at the numbers on that, it's really only 56% of American workers who qualify to be able to take FMLA, but then who can afford to not be paid for a quarter of their year, right?
Right.
Very, very few people. So what you end up with is a lot of women take far less than that, or certainly even the ones who are taking 12 weeks. This 12 weeks is kind of an invented thing. It's not actually developmentally a phase for mom or baby when it's like the right time necessarily to go back. So you have a lot of women, even those like me, who were able to take 12 weeks, even some of it unpaid, and have that be okay, still going back before they feel emotionally and physically ready to be there. So what I wanted to do was really give women as much agency in the workplace and at home as they could possibly have to make the right decisions for them. So whether that means staying home, whether that means going part-time, whether that means working harder than ever before or going for a promotion or whatever it is that you want to do, I want women to feel like they can make those choices and like they're not being imposed on them. So that was really the genesis of all of the advice that I sought out in the book from interviewing. I did long form interviews with more than 100 women, and I did a survey with almost 800 women. And I interviewed close to 100 experts and cited more than 100 scientific studies. And I was really trying to put all the pieces together because my own experience was really only my own. And it was really, truly like a somewhat privileged experience, even though I still found it hard. So I wanted to really make sure that everyone could find herself in this book.
Great. And so for you, what did you do? Did you go back full time? Did you go back part time?
Oh, yeah. No, I went back full time. So my husband, I sort of found my career a little sooner than my husband. We met in college, and he was in medical school and just finishing up medical school and going into his residency when we had our first son. Our second son was actually born the morning after he finished his last day of residency. So in both of those, with both of our kids, they were born in a time when I was the primary breadwinner by a lot. I think it was like a factor of 3 or a factor of 4 at that point. And we live in New York City, which is expensive. And so I actually, this is going to sound kind of crazy, and it is just somewhat that I'm an optimist, but I think I actually never really felt particularly guilty about going back to work because I knew that for us to have the life that we envisioned in front of us, it was a given that I was going to go back to work. Now, I wish that I could have taken more time. But I also knew, like I said, that 12 weeks was actually more than most women were able to take. Even still, when I was doing the research, this is years after having left Glamour and researching for the book, it's interesting because it always felt to me like 6 months would be kind of the right amount of time. Like that's when baby's starting to sit up. So if you leave your child at daycare or something, you're leaving him or her like holding a toy in her hand as she's sitting there, and she's transitioning to some solid foods in addition to whatever milk or formula you're giving her. And it just feels a little bit more like a solid baby at that point. So that instinctively was when I felt like would have been the moment when I would have wanted to go back to work. But then the science actually backs it up. And it shows that if a woman has 6 months of paid parental leave, that her baby is actually more likely to be healthy. And that's
interesting.
It's a lot to do with vaccines and with getting to well baby appointments and checkups. And it's much easier to do that when you're not having to leave work to go take the baby to the doctor. But also in terms of mom's mental health, and sort of emotional health, and all of that sort of huge sea change of identity that women go through, particularly when they're going back to work. 6 months is also the point at which mom is much, much less likely to have a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. That really falls off if mom has had 6 months of paid leave.
Okay. Great. And then what about moms? You did talk a little bit in the book about mom wanting to quit, having that sudden feeling of, oh, no, I don't think I can do this. Tell us about that. Did that happen to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it happened to me like daily, hourly, monthly, even though I loved my job. I had
Right.
I worked in a magazine where the sort of what's great and hard about that kind of career is that you actually see the masthead in the front of the magazine that shows you the ladder that you're trying to climb. And like I had climbed it pretty high. But yeah, it's funny when I interviewed all these women, I really tried hard to find a diverse array of approaches to motherhood and of approaches to career. So there's, hourly wage workers. There are, professional women, lots of degrees. There are adoptive moms, single moms, moms who use surrogates. There are same-sex moms who carry the baby, same-sex moms who didn't carry the baby.
Right.
All kinds of different approaches. The thing that I didn't actually even know that I was looking for was a diversity of ambition. And so it was surprising to me that didn't necessarily line up with people's income levels or like their seniority at work. Like, very senior people had this moment of feeling not ambitious, and actually counterintuitively, people who were in sort of, card punching jobs of like waitressing and people who worked shifts were also saying, I actually felt really driven in this moment because I knew that I was earning this money and doing this career to set an example for my child. So anyway, my whole point is that ambition, in spite of it, almost every single person I talked to had a moment of feeling like they wanted to quit. Whether it was just a blip of a bad day, like a bad conversation with their boss or their partner, or it was, months of struggle and agony. And so I actually decided for a mini chapter in the book to look at the research of, sorry about the noise, of what it takes to get through that feeling of having to quit. And there are a bunch of studies I found, but it really boils down to two things that are really worth mentioning. If you can make two lists, and I know this sounds like, kind of corny to say make a list, but really do make a list of what you get out of your job. And that can absolutely be a paycheck. It can be the satisfaction of being out to lunch with a new friend and being able to say, hey, I do X, and feeling pride in that. It can be setting an example for your child. It can be the friends you have at work. It can be all kinds of things. I'm see if I can, sorry to do this, if I can turn off the sound, if that makes a difference. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, well, hang on. When I do this, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, so ambition. So these women, so if you can make this list of all of these things that you get out of your job, it actually helps. It's been shown by these research to help you feel more focused in a time of transition back to work. So you sort of see what the goal is and why you're doing it, and the why really matters. Simultaneously, you can also make a list of all of the things that your job gets out of you. So you're a team player, you actually, your deliverables, you provide these things, but also you're setting an example and all the things that your job is getting out of you as a worker. And being able to look at that list, a whole other study showed, actually helps you, it helps you feel more comfortable in the compromises you're making in the return to work, which I thought was a really interesting way of putting it. It's acknowledging that you are absolutely making compromises. It's not trying to paint rainbows all over the thing, right. It is hard. But it's helping you feel more, it makes you feel more comfortable with the decisions that you're making along the way.
Okay. So obviously you didn't quit your job, and
No.
Let's see here. You did write also something about how do you actually pull off looking as if you did sleep a full 8 hours when you only really slept 3.
Again, I will say I'm in my 31st trimester and I still struggle with this, but it's interesting. It's actually not It's not what I was expecting because my background was, I worked at Glamour magazine, and so we did a lot of beauty and fashion pages, and I was, constantly the person trying to figure out, what lipstick to recommend. Um, it's actually really a lot to do with being good to your skin from the inside out. So I talked to a top dermatologist, and she works at a practice where they have a whole line of, skincare products, and she said, "Look, I have to tell you, it's really about hydrating. Make sure you drink enough water. And at the end of the day, wash your makeup off. At the bare minimum, that is the thing that you have to do because the idea is you want to actually have skin that's healthy enough that you don't have to spend a lot of time in the morning putting your makeup on. You don't want to have to cover everything up with makeup. So that helps in the morning. That helps you get out the door. I will say that, I relied heavily and still do on concealer, but it's, if your skin is well hydrated, it sort of, blends in much more easily. And then in terms of just like the best, there's a lot of style advice in the book as well. The very best tip that I like to tell people was one that I got from a professional coach and stylist. She has kind of a hybrid of those two jobs. He suggested that you actually create within your closet sort of a miniature closet within your closet of just the things that A, fit, and B, are appropriate for work. So that may only be like 6 things. It's been like 2 years since you've worn a lot of these clothes and they've just been waiting for you to get back into them, and you may want to put them on yet, but if they don't fit yet, they're just going to torture you in the morning. Mm-hmm. So the is just that, make that little miniature closet, choose only from there. Don't let the rest of the clothes drive you crazy in the morning and waste your time and make you start your day feeling bad.
Right.
And then if you see in that little miniature closet that you don't have a pair of pants, well, then clearly you got to go out and buy a pair of pants. But it makes it simpler to make those decisions and know what you actually need to buy in this moment and not.
Got it. And were you consuming a ton of caffeine?
It's so funny
to get you through the day?
Instagram this morning, I just reposted. There's an artist who's doing a project of some sort of form of art about breasts every day for 365 days this year, and it's called the Golden Boobies Project. And so my Instagram this morning was a repost from her that is a latte, and in the foam of the latte are these 2 breasts, and in the caption to it, I credited her, and then I said, yes, of course, it's decaf. And then actually in the comments, somebody just commented, no, it's okay to have caffeine while you're breastfeeding. And the truth is, it is okay. You can have the experts that I interviewed in the book, both the sleep experts and the lactation consultants said, it's okay to have a cup or 2, sort of see how your baby responds. And it's hard when you're pumping at work, of course, and to know which milk the baby is getting when, but you can kind of calibrate, and a little bit is okay.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. So I definitely had a little bit.
Oh yeah, of course. Let's see here. Oh, and then yes, about daycare.
Yeah.
I would think that this is hard to do, to leave your baby with someone, especially your first child.
Yes, it is. I found it really one of the hardest things. And it's funny, it's the first chapter in the book because it is a very primary decision a lot of new parents are making as they think about going back to work. But it was actually the last chapter I wrote because I found it, even years later, so hard to wrap my head around just the judgments around it and how do I tell people what's the right thing for them. We had a nanny in our home. In New York, it's a little bit more common to do that. And it was also the hours that daycare were available did not sync up with our work hours. So it would have been really challenging. And a nanny was an absolute financial stretch for us. We really, really, especially in those early years, had to prioritize to make it work. And she was wonderful, and it was the right decision for us. That said, I had a lot of, friends, and certainly I know a lot of people I interviewed were really happy with nanny shares or with having a family member in the home caring for their baby or daycare, certainly. So what I did is I looked at this huge compendium of studies that was done by a federal agency that essentially showed that there were benefits of daycare and there were benefits of being, having someone at home with the child. And you could kind of make a case for either one of those being good developmentally for the child or detrimental for the child too.
Right.
But at the very, very, very end of this report, and I was so glad that I got to the end, there's essentially this huge PS that says, but all of this is really determined, all of this is really predicated upon, the emotional comfort of the mother with the childcare decision she's making. And I was like, what does this say? So then I decided to do in this chapter, and I'm glad I actually saved it to do last, because at this point I felt like I had a little more confidence in my research skills, was to look at, okay, so how do you get comfortable with that decision? It's not really about making the logistical choice that's right for you, although certainly that is a part of it. What can you afford? What is convenient? What suits your hours? But you might have to ask yourself some of the emotional questions around childcare. Would you rather have one person caring for your child? Can you deal with the fact that person might feel like a substitute mother for you sometimes? Or would you rather have the checks and balances of a lot of people taking care of your baby, but maybe not quite that same deep bond? Do you want somebody in your home? Does it bother you? Do you feel too private to have someone, borrowing your rain boots on a rainy day because they're your size and they didn't bring rain boots and they want to take the baby out for a stroll? These sound like trivial questions, except that when you're going to work, when you're leaving your baby in someone's care, it's this stuff that pulls on you and nags at you. And if you can make a decision that works for you emotionally, you're going to feel so much better about the whole thing.
Yes. And so you ended up choosing the Nanny Routes, and that worked for you. Did you do daycare at all?
We actually, so it's really important if you possibly can to have a backup plan, if not two backup plans. And I was very lucky that my employer had backup daycare. I think it was 20 days that were available per child per year for backup. And it was a daycare center that was available to a lot of workplaces, but it happened to be in our office building. It was super convenient. It was still, a struggle those days to put the baby in the Bjorn and have the milk and like all of this, getting back and forth and commuting on the subway, 2 different subways, in icy weather or whatever with the baby. But it was such a blessing to have it there, because first of all, I could go visit him, at lunchtime if I wanted to. And so I got a good taste of what that felt like too. You definitely need a backup.
Yes. Okay. Now, last but not least, let's talk a little bit about date night.
Yeah. Yes. Do it.
Yeah. How did you fit that in? I think a lot of new parents are like, oh, no. Like I'd rather sleep.
Like totally. And maybe you should, honestly. So the last thing I wanted to make anyone do was feel like they had to add one more thing onto their list with this book, because everyone's lists are just overwhelming anyway. And there were so many women who talked about feeling guilty, which I have a whole other line of thinking on mom guilt. Like I think we need to be post mom guilt because it doesn't do anybody any good. But you shouldn't feel bad if you can't make a lot of time. So one thing, I really got kind of like nerdy about the math of the survey that I did. And I was able to see that there were a number of women who reported in 2 different questions. They reported that they, in the 5th trimester, they fought more with their partner than they ever had before. But simultaneously, those same women also said, like a subset of them, also said that they got closer to their partner than they ever had before. And I realized something interesting was going on there. And so I decided to, use the survey tool that I had to kind of cross-reference those 2 data points and see what did those women have in common. So one thing they had in common is they had a working mom mentor. A lot of these, 81% of these women said that they had, someone they could look up to who had been through this transition before, who they'd seen get to the other side of it. The other thing they had in common is that they spent between 1 and 5 hours alone with their partner per week without the baby. Now, I had always thought, like, I was really loath to tell anybody they needed to go have a date night, because like making the decisions about, first of all, it's a financially hard time. How are you making, budget for a babysitter and dinner? And then are you going to have the bottle of wine, or is it going to sit there and you're not going to drink it because you're worried about when you have to breastfeed next? And it just becomes kind of fraught and actually maybe not that enjoyable. However, when I looked at this array of women, so there were a number of women who spent less than 1 hour per week with their partner, and they were pretty unhappy in their partnerships. There were a few women who spent 5 hours or more alone with their partner per week, and they were, as expected, like ecstatically happy in their relationships. However, the difference between the women who spent at least 1 and then up to 4 hours and 59 minutes with their partner was almost negligible. And what that said to me is that you can spend 1 hour alone per week holding hands on the couch, watching a TV show, while the baby's sleeping in the other room. And that counts. that actually fuels your relationship just as much as those women who were taking the 4.5 hours and going out for the date and pumping before and pumping after and the whole shebang. So I found that very comforting. You do need to have date night, but it doesn't have to be an elaborate, long date night. It just needs to be some moment for the two of you to spend together, really enjoying one another.
So I don't have children. And so the concept of 1 hour in the midst of one whole week sounds, I'm
Terrible.
sure that couples before baby are spending a lot of quality time together. Weekends, they're doing things, they're going away maybe, or little road trips, or they're having a Netflix night.
Yeah.
And so they're spending lots of time together. And now suddenly, to me, 1 hour seems like...
So you have to remember, when you are with the baby, I remember really, really distinctly, there's this thing that happens if you're holding the baby, if the two of you are together, you look at the baby, like both of you hardly look each other in the eyes. It's not that you're not spending time together. It's just that you're spending time together focused on this wonderful little being that you created. And that's a great feeling.
Right.
It can also make it kind of easy to forget to look at each other too. So I'm not saying only spend an hour together a week. I'm saying make sure that in that week you have that hour when you really are looking into each other's eyes and talking about something that is not your baby and that brings you back to that couple that you were before you had a child. But certainly, yes, of course, spend lots of time together, even with the baby around too. The other thing that can really help is that when you're in especially if you're both back at work, and you're getting home at the end of the day and you're starting, what has been called the second shift, where you're starting kind of all the household duties and the cooking and the this and that and the diaper changes, getting ready for bed, the bath. I also really recommend that couples make a list with each other of what are the top 3 household or baby duties that A, you're good at, and B, you enjoy. And as much as you can, divvy up the duties so that, you're doing the stuff that actually brings you pleasure and that you enjoy about being a mother and being a partner and having a family. And same for him too. And then really own those things. I have one woman I interviewed who told me that she really got nervous. She had twins and she got nervous bathing them, but that her husband really was good at it. And so from the very, very beginning, when they brought home these preemie twins, the kids always had dad bath is what they called it. And they're like 4 years old now. And John, the husband in the family, is still the one who's in charge of bath time. And it gives him something that is his, and the kids, the kids really love it too. It becomes like a very splashy, fun
right.
bath.
Oh, that sounds sweet. So how can people find you? Tell us what's happening. Do you have,
Absolutely.
Tell us people
Yeah. So it started with the book, which came out last spring from Doubleday, but the paperback is coming out in the spring now. It's March 6th is actually when the paperback is coming out.
Oh, great.
So it'll be available. But then I also have really used that as a launch pad for a speaking and consulting business. So I talk to new mom groups a lot and a lot of community groups, but I also go into corporations, businesses, a lot of tech companies, finance firms, and law firms to help them make not just better policies, but better culture around new parenthood. So that is really what my next step is. And that's my next trimester as I branch into this new identity and new career myself.
And are you on all of the Facebook?
Oh gosh, yes. I'm on Facebook. It's the 5th Trimester on Facebook. On Twitter, I'm Lauren S. Brody. S is for Smith. And then on Instagram, which is really where I am most of the time, it's the 5th Trimester.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on. I love Instagram.
I know, me too. It's so easy.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'll have that in the show notes. Anything else you'd like to add? Anything maybe that we missed?
No, I'm so sorry about the headphones and the noise, but hopefully it just makes it more authentic.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, for all of those soon-to-be moms, or if you're in the midst, or if you're in your 4th trimester and you're just kind of thinking about what this next step is going to look like for you with your career, if going back to work is something that you're going to be doing or not. I think this is a great book to pick up, and people can find this anywhere, in all places.
Yeah, everywhere. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, independent booksellers. Yes, it should be everywhere. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on and everything you do to help women feel comfortable in who they are.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, have a beautiful day. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. To learn more about Lauren and for all the show notes, head on over to margaretromero.com/episode 67. If you are not following me on Instagram, head on over to Margaret Romero. And if you have yet to leave a review and you've been loving these conversations, I would so love it if you can head on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. Much love, many blessings. Thank you so much for listening. I'll speak to you all next week. Bye for now.